So that way later on he can't say, look, I was high, or I was on medication, or I didn't understand what was going on. Right. Judge Garnett is making sure that he is aware that he has a right to go to trial, and two, that he doesn't have to plead guilty if he doesn't want to, and that he knows what's going on day in and day out and what's going on today.
All right, we are learning some more details of inside in court. We do understand that Brian Thompson's family, they are in the courtroom seated in the first row. His mother, also Brian Thompson's widow, Paulette, they are there along with executives from the UnitedHealthcare company that Brian Thompson worked for. The U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York, James McDonald, also seated next to the family. We understand that Brian Thompson's widow appeared to be crying as the hearing began.
Anthony Carlo, we have him right outside the courtroom right now, and let's get an update from his position there. Anthony, what can you tell us?
Well, Dave, Liz, I'll tell you the latest information we just got right now is that Mangione specifically is pleading guilty to 2 charges. 1 count of interstate stalking resulting in death, 1 count of stalking through use of interstate facilities resulting in death. Both carry a potential life sentence in prison. So we know, of course, today is a pivotal moment in this case here, the Thurgood Marshall Federal Courthouse right behind us. You can see some of the media mob, but as Liz was just pointing out, this is the first time that Brian Thompson's family has appeared in the courtroom, the family of the slain UnitedHealthcare CEO, and his widow appeared to shed some tears at the precise moment that Luigi Mangione affirmed that he was entering a guilty plea on these federal charges. As you heard from very good legal expertise a few moments ago, this could have an implication on the state trial that is still right around the corner. We also understand, of course, today for the prosecution, I mean, this is a victory. They have scored a conviction here. Luigi Mangione has become one of the most infamous faces of criminal defendants that we have seen in recent time, from the moment that, of course, this killing happened in Midtown Manhattan, and Mangione was accused of that shooting and killing and charged with that. This has been an ongoing ordeal that has garnered international attention. And so for federal prosecutors today to be able to say that they have scored a conviction against Luigi Mangione on federal stalking charges, you have to imagine that they are feeling pretty happy right now. Of course, we anticipate potentially hearing from prosecutors once today's hearing has wrapped up. We do want to give you a little bit more background, of course, of everything that led up to this pivotal moment today.
It has been 618 days since UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down outside a hotel in Midtown.
In what appears at this early stage of our investigation to be a brazen, targeted attack.
5 days later, and nearly 300 miles away, Luigi Mangione was arrested, taken into custody by a rookie cop at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
It feels good to get a guy like that off the street, especially starting my career this way. It feels great.
As a completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people.
It was 10 days later, December 19th, that a much more subdued Mangione was extradited back to New York, arriving by helicopter and greeted by federal and local law enforcement.
We wanted to personally be here to show the symbolism of leading from the front. The apprehension, some of these detectives will finally sleep tonight after this person has been brought to justice here in New York City.
That same day, federal prosecutors charged Mangione with 4 federal crimes, and he was transferred to Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Mangione would also face state charges appearing in New York Supreme Court 2 days before Christmas.
Your Honor, he's not a symbol. He's somebody who is afforded the right to a fair trial. He's innocent until proven guilty.
Over the past year and a half, there's been plenty of legal wrangling, especially with Mangione facing both a federal and a state trial. Those federal charges were brought during the last few weeks of the Biden administration, and the U.S. attorney at the time signaled that the state case would come first. Then, when President Trump took office, his attorney general said she'd seek the death penalty in the case, signaling the federal prosecution was moving at a fast pace. The two cases have narrowed over the past year as Mangione's attorneys won the dismissal of some of the most serious charges during a hearing in January, taking the death penalty off the table.
We're all very relieved.
That means on the federal side, he's facing 2 counts of stalking resulting in death, and on the state side, the charges that remain include second-degree murder, criminal possession of a weapon, and forgery. So why take a plea on the federal side?
But if a guilty plea is taken, I think the overall hope is that if you can finalize the federal case, then you can revitalize the argument for double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy, of course, the big question now. The argument is that a defendant can't be prosecuted for the same crime twice. Mangione himself saying in court, quote, 1 + 1 is 2. Double jeopardy by any common sense definition. But just like everything else in this case, it's not that simple.
New York State prosecutors aren't going to give up. They will argue that there are different state laws, different from the federal laws, that ought to allow them to move forward with the case.
So prosecutors right now are going over the elements of the charges here, and they've also just said moments ago in court that Luigi Mangione's conduct led to Brian Thompson's death. Again, the UnitedHealthcare CEO captured on that infamous video being shot and killed. Before that, Judge Margaret Garnett told Mangione again that he has the right to change his mind. And we've been in this situation before. Earlier this summer, when there was speculation that Mangione would enter a guilty plea to the federal charges, and he wound up backing out of that. So here we are again. Mangione decides he does indeed want to plead guilty to these federal stalking charges. The judge is evaluating Mangione's demeanor very carefully. We know that she wanted to make sure that he was in a proper and clear state of mind to consent, of course, to entering a guilty plea. Mangione, moments ago in court, has said he's never been treated for any mental illness or addiction. He did say he took some medication 2 days ago for sleep, but he said rather that it was not affecting him in any way during these proceedings. So by all indication, Luigi Mangione, on his own volition, with the help of his defense team, again pleading guilty to federal stalking charges in connection to the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. There is no guarantee from what we know right now that there will be any kind of lenient sentence here. We know this carries a potential for a life sentence. The question is, and you guys have been going over this, how does this impact the state trial? And could the defense team now use this to bolster their argument on double jeopardy whenever the proceedings for that state case move forward?
You know, Anthony, this case sparked a massive public debate over America's healthcare system. It also led to a deeply polarizing social media reaction with some of social media idolizing the suspected killer. Did you see, we haven't seen much support as we've seen outside the courtroom, but what are you seeing and what kind of support did he have inside the courtroom?
Great question, Dave. Well, as you can see, there's not much else going on right now, but many cameras outside the courtroom. From our team inside the courtroom, they have reported that there are a number of supporters of Luigi Mangione seated in the courtroom, seated not far away from the family of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, but they are not wearing any buttons, any attire that suggests their support for Luigi Mangione, which we know in the past had become an issue and a matter that the court wanted to address to ensure that this case remained objective on all fronts. Of course, it gets difficult to accomplish that goal when there is so much attention surrounding a case. And as you mentioned, this has been an interesting one in the sense that this accused killer has garnered massive support from a lot of people who have voiced concerns over the state of the United States healthcare system and how they felt they have been mistreated by it. Remember, this all started with that video of a gunman who shot and killed the CEO of UnitedHealthcare.
All right, Anthony, we're going to let you do some more reporting while you are there outside of the courthouse. We know that there is a lot more information that we are expected to get in the next little while. We do want to bring back in ABC News legal contributor Bernardo Villalona. Bernard, I want to ask you, so it appears that he is pleading guilty to this open agreement. Talk us through the defense strategy of doing that. Why would he do that?
Well, number one, first off, they already weighed the strength and weaknesses of the case. And it's very clear that the government, whether it's the federal government or state prosecutors, they have a strong circumstantial case that Luigi Mangione is the person that took the life away of Brian Thompson on December 4th of 2024. So that's the number one thing that they looked into. Second, what they're trying to do always is you want to mitigate the exposure of your client. They already won in the sense that the death penalty was moved off the table because the counts that were made it eligible to the death penalty was dismissed. Then in state court, they also won in the sense that murder in the first degree, which carries a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, those counts were dismissed. Now, when it comes to these defense attorneys taking this open plea, it's clear that the government wasn't willing to engage in a plea agreement with them. They weren't willing to sacrifice anything. And why would they when they have a strong circumstantial case with a high likelihood of conviction at trial?
I just heard from the reporters who were in the courtroom. The judge said that there will be no sentencing today, which I suspect
Of course.
we all kind of knew that was going to happen. But the judge also said that depending on what happens in the state case, that the judge will add those sentencing whatever the sentence is there, to the federal charges. Is that common?
Well, first off, so I think what the judge is probably trying to ponder is, number one, you can't run a sentence concurrent to a case that hasn't been disposed of, meaning that the state case has to result in a conviction and he has to be sentenced before a federal court judge. If he is considering whether a sentence should run concurrent, he has to wait until that happens. The federal case in terms of the sentencing is not going to take place for months. Various parties are going to have input as to what will be the final sentence of Luigi Mangione. The government is going to submit a huge memorandum, pre-sentence investigation letter to the judge, making a recommendation as to what they believe the sentence should be. Brian Thompson's family is going to be able to speak at the sentencing. That's number one. Right. The Department of Probation is going to do a thorough investigation onto Luigi Mangione, and based on the guidelines, they're going to make a recommendation to this judge of what sentence Luigi Mangione should be sentenced to. The defense is going to provide a mitigation report, and that mitigation report is literally they're fighting for their life, the life of Luigi Mangione, because it's going to make all of the difference as to what the sentence is. What makes this case different than other cases is that, number one, Luigi Mangione is only 28 years old. So while the maximum is life, any digits of as to what number that this judge sentenced Luigi Mangione, whether it's 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, whatever the life expectancy of Luigi Mangione is going to be, that he has a chance to be free at some point. So that's why the defense is like, I'm going to take my chances and put myself at the mercy of the court and see what sentence I get from there. But here's the thing. If this defense team loses on the double jeopardy argument in state court.
That's what this whole thing is about.
Yeah,
almost,
but guess
basically.
what? Because now you're putting all your chips on one number.
Right.
If you lose, that guilty plea he entered into today can be used against him at the state trial. So that admission that I killed Brian Thompson, done deal.
All right, so then let's talk more about that. We do want to say that we got another note that this is not a plea deal or a bargain. This is a simple guilty plea. So he is pleading guilty to federal stalking that led in a death. Those were the charges at the federal level. On the state level, he is charged with second-degree murder. So let's talk about this double jeopardy argument that his defense team is now going to try to make, because these are completely separate charges.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start off by saying this. I was a prosecutor for 16 years, 13 years at the Kings County District Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, and 10 of those years I was a homicide prosecutor. Now, normally, the feds and state prosecutors, we could play in the sandbox, right? So we play well in the sandbox, and we can determine whether there should be a federal prosecution or whether there should be a state prosecution, and enter into agreement who's going to take the prosecution. But it seems that they didn't play well here.
Right.
So that's why we're left with the two different prosecutions. So murder in the second degree is the person with intent to cause the death of a person causes the death of Brian Thompson. Those are the elements, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really important because when the court determines how to evaluate whether double jeopardy actually exists, they're going to have to evaluate the elements of the murder in the second degree in state court, right, and what are the elements in the federal court, because they're two different sovereigns, they're two different charges. If the court determines it's two different charges with different elements, and it probably doesn't reside out of the same act, then no double jeopardy.
I just got to add one thing, because we're continually getting information from inside the courtroom, and I'm being told that right now Luigi Mangione is explaining to the judge why he killed Brian Thompson. And I can't imagine.
That doesn't happen.
No, that's exactly.
That never happens.
That does not happen.
I am stunned because it just adds to the complications in this
absolutely.
case.
So why would his defense team be allowing him to do this?
That does not happen. I am telling you that. And actually, that's not even a requirement where you're taking a guilty plea. Usually the judge is like, he looks at the elements of the crime and then says, okay, did you act with whatever the elements of the crime are? Never ask the why, because number one, motive is not required to be proved for the elements of this crime. But number two, it's not a requirement of any plea. So I think what the defense is doing, number one, tailoring to the audience that eventually, if this is a jury trial, hey, right, I want you to hear my point of view, and getting that out there. Two, presenting to the judge at the mercy of the judge, saying like, look, I'm coming to you and accepting responsibility. And I'm also going to tell you, how did I get here? What led me to this? I'm not some cold-hearted murderer. This is what was going through in my mind. So again, also tailoring the narrative in the sense of, let me calm everything down to make it work in my favor when it comes to time sentencing.
All right, we are finding out more information about what is going on in court right now. Apparently, Luigi Mangione was reading a prepared statement. Anthony Carlo, who is outside the courthouse, he's much more on exactly what Luigi Mangione is saying right now inside court. Anthony.
Yeah, Liz, that's right. Luigi Mangione, as you guys mentioned just moments ago, began telling the judge why he killed UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He said that he undertook this plan, quote, after enduring severe pain from a broken back and obstacles from the health insurance system. He went on to say, quote, I learned that the United Healthcare Company would be holding its annual investor conference in New York City in December of 2024. Mangione said that he duped UHC so he could learn the exact location of the conference by emailing UHC. So we're getting a little bit more indication on how exactly Luigi Mangione knew to go to that hotel in Midtown and essentially prey on UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He posed as an investor, Mangione says, with more than $50 million in capital. So again, Mangione in the courtroom divulging everything that went into that plan to kill Brian Thompson. He says, quote, I traveled with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson. So he is bearing all right now in front of the judge. Mangione said, quote, I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. So we know, of course, from the coverage of this case so far, at various times Luigi Mangione has had outbursts. He has been very confident, appearing confident in some of the things he has said leading up to this point, including the double jeopardy comment that he made, 1 + 1 is 2, suggesting that this is clearly a double jeopardy case. Well, from what we're reading now, from our team in the courtroom right now, it sounds like Mangione is very confidently standing there before the judge and divulging everything that went into planning and executing this assassination-style killing in Midtown Manhattan back in December of 2024.
It is certainly a bold move by the defendant in this case. Thank you so much, Anthony. Stay on the scene, continue to get us the latest reports. We want to bring in Michael Bachman, former Manhattan prosecutor here in the city, of course. Mike, thanks for joining us. We've been getting some excellent legal opinions on this. What do you make of the fact that right now you're hearing Mangione is talking to the judge about his motive for what occurred?
Well, in the federal court, this is standard operating procedure. A court will not accept a guilty plea from a defendant without a full allocution as to what he did. The court says to the defendant, before I can accept your guilty plea, I want to make sure you are in fact guilty of the crime charged. Tell me in your
appears that
your own words what you did to make yourself. The defendant's lawyers generally draft that allocution, and the defendant then reads it. But he has to actually articulate what he did to make out the elements of all of those charges.
All right, we do understand that the judge has just accepted the guilty plea from Luigi Mangione. Michael, I want you to go ahead and put your former Manhattan prosecutor hat back on. If you were a Manhattan prosecutor right now, hearing him plead guilty to these federal charges, what is your argument going to be to continue on with the state case?
Well, the state prosecutor's argument is going to be that we are prosecuting a different type of behavior. This was a stalking charge in which a death resulted. We have the right to defend the people of the state of New York as compared to federal prosecutors on a different harm. And that harm is a straight out murder. This was not a stalking where a death occurred. This was a person who, in a premeditated fashion, pointed a gun at the back of an innocent person and killed him. We have a right to vindicate those rights. That's what the prosecutor's office is going to be arguing in that case, and that it's not double jeopardy covered because it's two different types of harms. The elements of the crimes are different, and we have a right to go forward. Now, of course, we have a defendant who allocated in open court that he committed a murder. It makes the prosecution of the state case impossible. And what will happen here is, if the judge rules that double jeopardy does not prevail, the defendant, in my opinion, will plead guilty to the state charge. He will ask that the time run concurrent. He will preserve his right to appeal the issue of double jeopardy to the Court of Appeals and hope that the court dismisses the state prosecution. But look, if the defendant in the federal court gets life without parole, a lot of this is kind of moot. He's never going to see daylight.
Let me ask you two points here, if I could, Mike. First of all, we just got more information that the date has been set for the sentencing. It's December 18th. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard that correctly.
No, December 18th.
December 18th. Yep. The question I have, Mike, is two things. You mentioned the judge. Is it the state judge that decides whether this double jeopardy legal angle works? And what kind of a option does that provide in the case of an appeal?
Well, Judge Caro, yes, the judge in the state case will have a motion filed by Mark Ignifilo and Karen, by the law firm, excellent lawyers, saying that the case should not proceed because it violates the New York State Constitution. Judge Caro will decide that issue. At that point, if the judge rules against them on double jeopardy, the defendant will either proceed to trial, which is not likely, or he will carve out the right to appeal the double jeopardy issue later on after he's sentenced. That's what I expect is going to happen.
So, go ahead. Sorry, Mike.
No, I finished my thought.
Okay, we are expecting a news conference to get underway shortly with the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District, and we have just been told the proceedings in court have now officially ended. Mike, I do want to ask you, in his statement, Mangione talked about his back injury and his back pain. When we were speaking earlier in our 10 o'clock show, we had talked a little bit about his mental state and how that is going to play into sentencing and this extreme emotional disturbance. Can you explain that a little bit more now that we know that he's officially pleaded guilty and to what those charges are?
So the defense in writing the allocution for Mangione to read to court basically is trying to detail, number one, what they want the court to know like right away, what they want the public to know, and what they intend to raise at sentencing. So they are going to raise his mental state as kind of a mitigation for his conduct and why maybe he shouldn't get life without parole. Maybe he should get 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, but not life without parole. And I can assure you, every word that Mangione said was enough to meet the elements, but was also delicately and intricately carved out by their lawyers before he said a word. So whatever he said, he wanted the judge to hear. And look, at the end of the day, there's no secrets here. The judge is going to know exactly what occurred because the prosecution, before he's sentenced, is going to lay out in enormous detail all of the conduct, and the defense will do the same. So there's no hiding the ball here in federal court. The defendant's going to get interviewed by pretrial services, who are going by the probation department, who's going to put together a complete report for the court about the defendant's mental history, his drug addictions, his childhood. Was he abused? Wasn't he abused? Who were his parents? The court's going to know everything about this defendant, and Mark Ignifilo and his firm are going to be putting out a very detailed sentencing memorandum. I've done cases with Mark. He's an excellent lawyer. You could expect a several hundred-page submission on behalf of Mangione, beseeching the court to impose a sentence that will prevent this young man from dying in jail.
Before I ask this follow-up question, I want our audience to know our own reporter, Eyewitness News reporter Dawn Miles, is in the courtroom right now working her way out. She's going to give her eyewitness account of what happened in that courtroom and the latest developments in this case. But Mike, back to you. In your experience, how likely is it that the double jeopardy legal angle has a chance of working?
Well, it does have a chance. You may recall the Paul Manafort case, which was one of President Trump's an individual associated with Trump who ended up getting indicted in federal court for some financial improprieties. He was then brought to trial as well in New York State. The Court of Appeals in New York State threw it out, saying double jeopardy. He had already been prosecuted in federal court, and the prosecution in state court shouldn't proceed. So there is precedent for this, but there's precedent going the other way as well. I think he has I think he has a pretty decent chance of this getting double jeopardied out. I think it passes the laugh test by a long shot.
All right. Well, Michael, we appreciate your insight. We just want to let our viewers know you're looking at a live picture of outside the federal courthouse where proceedings have adjourned just a few minutes ago. You are seeing reporters and those who are inside the courtroom leave the courthouse now. We understand that Brian Thompson's family, his mother and his widow Paulette, they were inside to hear today's proceedings. We're waiting for the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York, James McDonald. There is a podium set up outside of the courthouse. We are waiting for a news conference from him. Just to provide you with a little color from inside, when the Thompson family entered the courtroom before today's proceedings started, the courtroom understandably became silent as they sat down. A few rows behind them were executives from UnitedHealthcare, where the victim, Brian Thompson, worked. And then not too far away from the family were 2 rows filled with supporters of Luigi Mangione. Luigi Mangione himself, he walked in, he sat not too far away from the family. He was wearing a beige jail outfit. He had a stern expression on his face. Didn't really look at anyone. As far as we understand, his family is not in the courtroom. And he had 2 U.S. Marshals on either side of him. But again, you're now looking on the larger picture. That is our live shot from Newscopter 7 looking down onto the courthouse in Lower Manhattan.
You know, this is a case, obviously, as I mentioned before, has ignited massive public debate. And of course, security, as you mentioned, would be very tight. But it's just a small gathering from what we've seen in the past in terms of onlookers. And I want to bring in our legal analyst that's been joining us here, Bernardo Noella. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Tell me a little bit about what's going to happen at the sentencing and, you know, considering the public nature of this case, what kind of role that might have in the federal case sentencing that we're expecting in December 18th?
Well, first off, in terms of the federal sentencing, what happens in state court is going to play a role as to exactly what we expect to see at the federal sentencing. Because if you recall, District Attorney Alvin Bragg said that he does wish to be present or to speak whenever there's a determination as to what type of sentence Mr. Mangione should get, especially since it has huge implications on the state case. So what we expect to see is what I described earlier, where all parties are going to submit a sentencing submission to this judge, but especially the one from the Department of Probation, because they are going to give a recommendation to this judge, and judges usually take high consideration as to what they actually request or recommend. But remember, it's going to be the prerogative of the judge as to what sentence to give Luigi Mangione. But more importantly here, he has that chance where he can avoid doing a life sentence. But as sentencing, we're going to expect where the judge is going to go over like what are the guidelines in this case. They're going to go over that he's going to state that he received all of the sentencing submissions. The prosecution, the government is going to make a statement, generalize everything that was stated in the sentencing submission. But Brian Thompson's family is going to have an opportunity to speak to the judge as well and let the judge know what type of sentence that she wants in this case, because of course no sentence will replace the life of Brian Thompson, but to put that human feel to it, like I lost my husband at the hands of Luigi Mangione.
And the impact it has had on their lives.
And then you'll have the defense that's going to make that huge presentation, again, fighting for life in the sense of what to give Luigi Mangione. And Luigi Mangione is going to have an opportunity, a huge opportunity to make his case in front of this judge, requesting and pleading for leniency. Ultimately, the judge makes a decision.
All right, Bernarda, stand by for 1 second. We do want to check in with our Darla Miles. She was in the courtroom as these proceedings were happening, and Darla joins us now live. Go ahead, Darla.
Well, Liz, the tone and tenor of this proceeding took a different one than every other one that we've had here with Luigi Mangione. First of all, I want to tell you that the family of Brian Thompson and UnitedHealthcare executives, they marched into this courtroom like an army, a united front. This is the first time we've seen his family. His 78-year-old mother, she has steely white gray hair, stoic face, his wife, his siblings, other extended family members. And when they saw Luigi Mangione walk into the courtroom when he was brought inside, some of them started to cry. We saw family members consoling other family members, like grabbing the shoulder of what is presumed to be Brian Thompson's brother. And so that really set the tone of this proceeding. It started off with Karen Agnifilo answering the judge, saying, she says, look, you requested this hearing. Do you have an application to the court? She says, we would like to change our plea to guilty. So again, as we've been hearing from our legal experts, this is not a plea deal. There was no deal in place. Luigi Mangione walked into this courtroom, pled guilty to the existing 2 counts against him in federal court, the interstate stalking resulting in the death of Brian Thompson, and also the cyber stalking, the interstate travel resulting in the death of Brian Thompson. And he basically said there was no plea agreement in place with federal prosecutors. She then asked him a series of questions, whether or not he was coerced into this plea, if he understood that he would be making this guilty plea and the ramifications of it. That took about 10 minutes. He answered, yes, Your Honor. But this is where things really changed in the court. He then gave a full allocution to the death of Brian Thompson. He talked about how he endured years of excruciating back pain and how he wanted to get the attention of the healthcare industry. He said that he actually posed as an investor who wanted to spend $50 billion investing in UnitedHealthcare. He emailed them and wanted to see what that response would be, and that he got an immediate response as opposed to the responses he received from UnitedHealthcare when he was receiving treatment. He said he traveled to New York City in November of 2024, that he made a 3D printed gun, that he put a silencer on it, that he walked to the back of Brian Thompson and shot him. He gave a full allocution to the facts of this crime, which does obviously change the case because he now has on the record in federal court admitting to the details of this murder. As he allocated to the murder, you could see the wife of Brian Thompson, she was wiping his tears. Brian Thompson's mother was wiping her tears. This proceeding took about 20 minutes, but you could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. There were only a few Luigi Mangione supporters in the courtroom and visible today. We saw one of them saying that she was sad and saying, I'm so sad that he perhaps, is admitting to guilt in this crime. But this is a full guilty plea to the 2 existing federal counts against him. There is no sentencing agreement in place with federal prosecutors. They did, however, submit a letter to the court saying they wanted a range around 25 years, but the judge in this case made it very, very clear. Number one, if someone promised you a sentence, you should not hold on to that. Number 2, if I can make it more, I can make it less, and there is still a state proceeding in this case, and the sentence in that case could be consecutive to a federal sentence, not concurrent, so it could be added on the back of that. And she also said, listen, if you are not happy with what I ultimately sentence you, because I am the one who will decide your sentence, not your defense attorneys, not federal prosecutors, you cannot withdraw your plea in this case. This plea is final. Do you accept that? A few times he hesitated and he paused, but that is how things played out in court. I can tell you right now, Liz, that we are waiting for the family of Brian Thompson to come out here and make a statement, as well as perhaps executives from UnitedHealthcare. But this is definitely a big twist in this case, as Luigi Mangione just gave a full allocution to the murder of Brian Thompson.
Wow, just a fascinating day in court. Darla, we appreciate that insight and the color as to what played out this morning in a very dramatic 20-minute proceeding.
Certainly a turning point day in the Luigi Mangione case. A man accused of stalking, slaying the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, a case that began on December 4th, 2024, and his arrest when that murder happened, and then on 2024 of December 9th, when he was finally arrested in Pennsylvania. You are now watching Eyewitness News at noon, and good afternoon. I am David Navarro.
And I'm Liz Cho. Sandra is working later this afternoon, and you just heard it less than an hour ago. Luigi Mangione pleading guilty to 2 federal charges: interstate stalking resulting in death and stalking through the use of interstate facilities resulting in death. Both charges carry a possible maximum sentence of life in prison.
Mangione then read a statement in court explaining what he did, saying in part, I traveled with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson. I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died.
We have team coverage on this major shift in this very high-profile case. Darla Miles was inside the courtroom when that plea was announced, but we are going to begin with Eyewitness News reporter Anthony Carlo. He is outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, Liz, Dave, as we know, the big headline today, Luigi Mangione pleading guilty to federal stalking charges in connection to the shooting and killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. But as you pointed out, some of the most interesting detail that came out of this hearing today was the look into the motive that Luigi Mangione gave the court himself, standing before the judge to talk about why he killed the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. We do want to pull up some direct quotes from a prepared statement that Mangione read the court. Quote, after enduring severe pain from a broken back and obstacles from the health insurance system, I learned that UnitedHealthcare would be holding its annual investor conference in New York City. I traveled with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson. I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. That is a direct quote from the defendant today and now convicted killer, Luigi Mangione, who again today pled guilty to the federal charges he was facing. Also worthy pointing out, he said he knew what he was doing was illegal. You're looking at family of Brian Thompson that walked into the courthouse shortly before this briefing, followed by defense lawyers for Mangione. As we've pointed out so far, we know this was the first time that the family of slain UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was actually in the courtroom. His widow, his mother, his widow actually broke down in tears when this hearing began, and then she had to sit there and, of course, listen to the man who said that he killed her husband. Luigi Mangione has become one of the most infamous faces of criminal defendants over the past couple of years after, of course, that the world
Anthony, I want to
first
go
saw
ahead and
that
interrupt
video
you because we have the defense team right now at the podium and they are briefing us. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
From the events of December 4th, 2024, outside of the UnitedHealthcare Investor Conference here in Midtown Manhattan. It was a single tragic event, yet he's being prosecuted twice for the same conduct.
As Luigi explained in court today, he endured years of severe, debilitating pain following a broken back while struggling to navigate our healthcare and health insurance systems. Like the thousands of people who have reached out since this tragedy to share their own experiences, he believed that the system had failed him and destroyed his life. Despite this being a single isolated event, Mr. Mangione has been unfairly treated since the outset in every way and has successfully fought off terrorism charges and the death penalty, while also fighting at the same time 2 simultaneous prosecutions in 2 jurisdictions who are trying to punish him twice for the exact conduct. He's been treated differently from every other defendant charged with this offense in New York. However, thankfully, New York law does not allow this. New York law does not permit a person to be prosecuted and punished twice for the exact same crime under a statute that governs successive prosecutions. It's also known as the double jeopardy law. Today's guilty plea triggers this statute, and we just filed our motion in state court explaining why the state charges must be dismissed under New York's double jeopardy protections. We will not be taking any other questions. Thank you so much for coming.
You have been listening to the lawyers for Luigi Mangione basically making their case that they believe he's being prosecuted twice for the same act, both in the federal and the state court. They talked about him suffering years with chronic pain, that he believed the system had failed him, and that this was one single event and he is being unfairly treated.
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring in Bernardo Villalona, who's been sitting here talking us through this whole thing. I mean, they just laid out their case that they truly believe this is double jeopardy, that he's been treated unfairly and differently throughout the duration of this, and that this guilty plea now triggers the statute, and they have filed that motion to make sure that these charges in the state case are thrown out.
Exactly. So if you recall, last year, I believe September or December, I'm not sure, the defense had submitted a motion requesting that the state indictment be dismissed on the grounds of double jeopardy. And Judge Carroll issued a decision and said that is premature because there hasn't been a conviction or it hasn't been triggered in the sense that double jeopardy is triggered. So now, because he pled guilty, now it's set things in motion where it's actually ripe to submit this claim to this judge. So now we know at least that a motion has been submitted. So now it's going to be up to Judge Carroll to decide when the prosecution has to submit a reply opposing this double jeopardy claim, and then determine how long is it going to take for this judge to make a decision. Because as of now, still the trial date of September 8th is still on the books. I believe that Judge Carroll will probably deny this motion. He denies the motion, then it depends whether this defense team is going to appeal, go to file an Article 78 proceeding and say, let's put a stop to all of this and let a higher court make the determination, or whether they're going to have to move forward with this state prosecution.
What audience do you think Luigi Mangioni's lawyers that we just listened to were playing to when they made those statements and tried to make people more sympathetic to Mangione? Were they talking to the judge in the sentencing, or are they talking to a potential new jury that will sit down and hear the state case?
Well, the thing is that now he has entered a guilty plea, so now he is a convicted stalking that resulted in the death of someone. So really the only audience that matters right now is for the federal court judge as well as the state court judge, because they're going to make the determination of what happens with this case. Would the state prosecution be dismissed? What type of sentence Luigi Mangione is going to get? But in the sense of that, if this falls apart and there's no double jeopardy grounds and we have to go forward with the state court trial, then I want the jury pool to know where we stand. Feel sorry for me.
I was also going to mention that too, because September 8th is when we're supposed to start jury selection. The judge has already ruled it's going to be an anonymous jury, but we just had this massive court proceeding. I understand that we have the U.S. Attorney News Conference that's about to begin.
Yes, let's go to it.
There we go.
Good afternoon. I'm Jamie McDonald, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. At 6:45 on a December morning, Luigi Mangione stalked and murdered Brian Thompson in cold blood on a public sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. Just a few moments ago, Mangione pled guilty to his heinous act. This was not a spontaneous act of violence. It was deliberate, calculated, and premeditated. In the days leading up to the murder, the defendant very carefully prepared for the attack. He tracked Mr. Thompson's whereabouts, conducted surveillance along the route he knew Mr. Thompson would take, and positioned himself to carry out the plan. Then, on a sidewalk on West 54th Street, the defendant murdered Mr. Thompson, shooting him from behind with a 9mm handgun equipped with a silencer. He shot Thompson twice at close range. The second shot came as Mr. Thompson turned and faced the defendant. The defendant did this as everyday New Yorkers walked nearby, and while the rest of the city woke up to start their day. Mangione then ran away, leaving Mr. Thompson to die. The defendant committed this murder in an attempt to draw public attention to his dislike of certain businesses. But we live in a civilized society governed by the rule of law. We debate, we disagree, we protest. We do not commit murder. No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder. There can be no celebrity in assassination. Any person who celebrates, encourages, or excuses actions like these is fundamentally wrong. Mangione attempted to send a public message through violence, but the message that emerges today is very different. Violence is not a legitimate instrument to promote any political or social message. And those who resort to violence in an effort to advance their beliefs will be prosecuted, convicted, and put in jail. Today, the Southern District of New York, together with our law enforcement partners, writes the final chapter of Mangione's federal prosecution. Now, he stands convicted in federal court and faces life in prison. One other point that's important to note. While the defendant pled guilty, our office does not have a plea agreement with him. Instead, he pled open, which means he pled guilty to all pending counts in the indictment. There are no accommodations or concessions, and we are free to seek the maximum penalty under the law. I'd like to thank the dedicated prosecutors of our office's Violent Organizations and Crime Unit, who are beside me, for their remarkable efforts to bring this case. I would also like to thank the NYPD and the FBI, whose tireless and incredibly sophisticated investigative efforts made this conviction possible. Finally, I want to express on behalf of all of us here our deepest sympathy and compassion for the many family members and friends of Brian Thompson. Mr. Thompson's family and many of his friends were in court for the guilty plea today. I know they will have an opportunity to be heard at sentencing. We all stand in awe of their love for their family and for their friend, and their unwavering commitment to seeing justice done in this case. We hope they can take some solace in the fact that from the beginning, we have brought the full force of the federal government to bear in this case. In this prosecution, we have consistently pursued the maximum penalties under the law as necessary and just punishment for these crimes. The result achieved today now allows our office to seek the maximum penalty allowed, life imprisonment, which, as I've conveyed to Mr. Thompson's family, is what we intend to seek. I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Tisch.
Good afternoon. Thank you, U.S. Attorney McDonald, and thank you to the prosecutors and the federal law enforcement partners who have worked alongside the New York City Police Department throughout this case. Today, Luigi Mangione pleaded guilty in connection with the murder of Brian Thompson on a Midtown Manhattan sidewalk in December of 2024. This is an important moment of accountability, and my thoughts remain first and foremost with Mr. Thompson's family and everyone who knew and loved him. But I also want to take a few minutes today to recognize the extraordinary police work that brought us here. From the moment that Mr. Thompson was assassinated on the morning of December 4th, the NYPD mobilized an enormous investigative effort. Our detectives combed through thousands of hours of surveillance video, followed up on hundreds of tips, and worked through an extraordinary volume of forensic and digital evidence. They used some of the most sophisticated technology available to law enforcement, and they paired it with the kind of painstaking, old-fashioned detective work that has defined the New York City Police Department for generations, interviewing witnesses, canvassing neighborhoods, retracing the suspects' movements, and pursuing every viable lead. Most importantly, they developed a clear image of the man we were looking for and got that image out to the public and to law enforcement agencies across this country 5 days after the murder. That work paid off in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where an alert member of the public recognized Mangione and local police took him into custody. That was not simply a lucky break. It was the culmination of 5 days of relentless investigative work that gave the public the information it needed to recognize the suspect and gave our law enforcement partners what they needed to act. This case began with the worst kind of violence on our streets. It was answered by the very best of the New York City Police Department. To every member of the NYPD who played a role in this investigation, you should be enormously proud for bringing us to this day. And to those who idolize Luigi Mangione, I say this: violence is not a cause, murder is not a message, and a killer is certainly not a hero. Now I'd like to introduce the FBI's Assistant Director in Charge for the New York Field Office, Jim Barnacle.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good day. My name is James Barnacle. I'm the Assistant Director in Charge of the FBI New York Field Office. I want to begin by addressing the family, friends, and colleagues of Brian Thompson. We had the chance to sit down with the family this morning, and they are still grieving, and they have been grieving for almost 2 years as Brian was taken away in the most heinous way possible. They lost a son, a brother, a husband, and a father, and a friend to many colleagues and other people. The family deserves closure, the clarity, and the assurance that every step taken throughout our investigation, the New York City Police Department's investigation, the Altoona Police Department's investigation, and the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecution reflected the gravity of the situation and the importance of Brian's life. While today's plea doesn't replace the void he left behind, I hope it offers a glimmer of the closure that the Thompson family and friends deserve. This tragedy shocked the nation and left a deep impact on everyone it touched. Violence driven by hostility toward opportunity and success stands in sharp contrast to the values true Americans hold dear. But rest assured, this FBI and our partners never stopped working to bring this killer to justice. While a plea was entered today, we know the crime has not been erased. Thank you to the FBI's Violent Crime Task Force, our largest partner on that task force, the New York City Police Department, the New York State Police Department. Thank you to the prosecutors and the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, led by Jamie McDonald. Thank you. And I want to thank the officers and detectives of the New York City Police Department, led by Commissioner Tisch, for your agency's unwavering pursuit of truth and accountability. Thank you, Commissioner. I also like to thank the Altoona Police Department in Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, who helped facilitate the extradition to New York. We're incredibly grateful to our partners, and we wish the Thompson family comfort and strength as the legal process continues. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You have been listening to a press conference held by the U.S. Attorney McDonald, joined by Police Commissioner Tisch and the FBI, all reacting to Luigi Mangione's guilty plea in the federal court. They said, the U.S. Attorney saying this was not a spontaneous act. This was a premeditated act. Mangione prepared for the killing, stalked Brian Thompson, then killed him on December 4th, 2024. There is no excuse for murder, no grievance or ideological belief justifies it. They went on to discuss the public state that Mangione has emerged from this event. They say no celebrity is above this. There's no support. The support for anything this man did was fundamentally wrong. And Commissioner Tisch also said this is an important moment of accountability.
Yeah, it was quite a news conference there. We do understand that the family of Brian Thompson, the victim, they are no longer at the courthouse. They are not speaking publicly. They walked outside past the media, refused to answer any questions, but they have, however, released a statement that does say, quote, "Today's guilty plea marks an important step forward toward justice for Brian and our family. While nothing will ease the pain of losing him, we are grateful that the federal justice system has held the person responsible for this heinous act accountable. Now we look to the court to ensure that sentencing reflects the severity of this crime. We remain mindful that additional proceedings in New York and Pennsylvania are still to come, and we will continue to seek the justice that Brian deserves." Well, joining us now back on set is ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, thanks for being here so much this morning. You heard the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York, James McDonald, specifically and point out several times that this was an open plea. There was no agreement, and because of that, they are going for the maximum penalty.
Absolutely. They wanted to make it clear to the public that, look, we didn't engage in conversations to give this person a break, Luigi Mangione a break, just because he wanted to accept responsibility. So will be looking for the maximum type sentence in this case. And we're going to expect that in their motions when they submit it in terms of their sentence submission and on the day of sentencing.
You know, you talked earlier that at least from the sidelines, it appeared like the state prosecution and the federal prosecution weren't necessarily playing with each other, and they were almost their own worlds, if you will.
They were jockeying for who's going to go first.
It's sad.
Do you see that as having any impact going forward?
Well, it's a huge issue because we could have streamlined this prosecution, right? What's the goal of the prosecution? To seek justice, right? Seek accountability, right? To protect the public. So how do we best, with two offices that are tasked with protecting the public and accountability and in terms of pursuing justice, and they couldn't get on the same page? Honestly, what should have happened, based on my experience being a prosecutor for 16 years, that the federal government shouldn't have gone forward. They should have left this prosecution for the state where it properly belongs, because it's an intentional killing, right? One of the normal killings, right? Every day here in New York City. Not every day because crime is down, but you know what I'm saying in terms of that. And that way you would have been able to prevent this double jeopardy argument. You would have been preventing the trauma that the Brian Thompson family is going through with seeing the multiple court appearances and the arguments made by the defense. So ultimately, very disappointed in that. So, and knowing that it's going to have an impact about the type of sentencing that Luigi Mangione is going to get. And it was clear that the defense took advantage of both sides fighting, the infighting amongst each other.
Stay with us, Bernardo. We actually have Darla Miles outside the courtroom. We want to check back in with her. Darla, what's the latest there?
So, David and Liz, as you know, right behind me, we just heard from the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, Jamie McDonald, NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, and before that, the defense attorneys for Luigi Mangione, Karen and Mark Agnifilo, after this extraordinary morning where we heard Luigi Mangione allocute to the murder of Brian Thompson and his interstate stalking charges here in federal court. Let me tell you a little bit more about the demeanor of Luigi Mangione during his allocution this morning. He remained seated. He had the option to stand up, but he read from a prepared statement. And in that statement, he talked about, "I suffered from a broken back and debilitating pain for years. I felt like I was not being treated fairly by the healthcare industry. So what I did," and this is paraphrasing, that he posed as an investor. This person who has a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania, a highly educated man, was able to infiltrate UnitedHealthcare, basically pose as an investor who wanted to spend $50 billion in the industry and making them think that he wanted to invest in it. And instead, he stalked Brian Thompson. He talked about how he used a 3D printer to make part of a gun, how he equipped it with a silencer, how he traveled to New York City in November 2024, and how he shot him in the back of the head walking up behind him in Midtown Manhattan, December 4th, 2024. During this time, we saw the family of Brian Thompson. Liz, you just mentioned they have left the courthouse, but they entered into this courtroom this morning like an army. The entire front row full of family members. His mother, 78 years old now, steel white hair, stoic face, looking square in the face of the man who now has admitted to shooting and killing her son in cold blood, execution style. She had a stone face, but when he started to allocute and detail the crime, outline the details of his murder, she broke into tears, as well as the wife of Brian Thompson. The reason I bring up his mother is because in state court, we've heard a lot from the ADA is talking about how they are forging forward with this case, how the 77-year-old mother of Brian Thompson wants to know how and why her son is dead. The 78-year-old mother of Brian Thompson is not getting any younger. She wants her day in court. She wants to know how and why her son is dead. She found that out this morning when Luigi Mangione entered into this courtroom, not with a plea agreement, but changing his plea from not guilty to guilty in this case. A federal judge here said, listen, you are at my mercy now. I have the right to determine what your sentence is. You cannot change your plea if you don't like what your sentence is. And right now we know that there was a sentencing recommendation from prosecutors around 24 years rather. But again, that is still part of this discussion, and they'll be back in December 18th for that sentencing hearing.
Yeah, it must have been a remarkable moment. We know that the Thompson family has not appeared in court before. For them to hear those details today from Luigi Mangione, just moments after pleading guilty, it must have been a very painful time for the family, and continues to be. All right, Darla, we appreciate all of your insight. We're going to take a quick break right now, and we will be right back.
Do I just start?